All right, hey, welcome to part two of us talking about Cypress and Capybara. Uh, uh, Today, I hope to get through more than just one of these bullet points. I didn't make as much progress in part one, and then I took a 2-day break because I realized that when you're using Cypress and Rails, the test data management story still isn't good enough, and so I beefed up our Cypress Rails gem a little bit to make managing your test data a little bit easier. So, meant to do a screencast, ended up doing some open source. Very often when I mean to do some open source, I end up doing a blog post or something. Often, what I'm just focused on is like making software less of a pain to work with. And so that usually requires a multi-pronged approach. So today we're going to just start writing our first normal-ish tests of this little hobbyist Japanese language app. I'm excited to have you along for the ride. We're going to start with using Capybara and attempting to write a basic test of a sign-up workflow with Capybara. And then we're going to switch over and see what the same test would look like if we were writing it under Cypress and using Cypress Rails. All right, so without any further ado, let's dive in and figure this out. So I'm going to quit out of that work in progress. I still use Gitx, which is embarrassing because it hasn't been supported in years and years, but old habits die hard. And then looks like I had Cypress running. All right, so starting from scratch, we're going to write a Capybara test. What I'd like to do in this case is use Rails' built-in test fixtures. I've already written a handful of fixtures now. If you're not familiar with Rails or what the test fixture system is, the Rails guides are a pretty good intro, but basically it's just like, here's some YAML files, define like some basic data, and we can make that data available for you in the database very efficiently by just serializing it straight into SQL, as opposed to like hydrating a whole bunch of Ruby objects and repetitively, creating them manually and then persisting those to the database and syncing them up. It's just a real dumb like slip and slide into your database. I'll show you a little bit about like what the data that we're starting with looks like. Ultimately, test fixtures, the most important one is items, because this app doesn't really mean anything if you don't have vocabulary and Chinese characters, which are called kanji in Japanese, to study from. So I've got 6 items here that I created, I just kind of pulled from production. First one is dog or inu. Second one is puppy or ko-inu. Third one is also puppy, but this one is an anglicism, a loan word from English, puppy. And then 3 words about walking. So the verb to walk, aruku. Then here we've got the kanji component that just means to walk. And so kanji are just building blocks here, not a word per se, but used in a bunch of words. And then sleepwalk here. So mu yu byo. And this doesn't actually contain that kanji at all, but because it's walking adjacent, and a lot of how the program works is that it's looking for similar English words sometimes to identify whether or not you might have got an alternate match to the word that you're trying to produce. I wanted to get some clusters of similar words. Additionally, lately I've been using a feature called lists to curate collections of items that you would want to study in Japanese. And these 2 examples here are just vocabulary lists. One is a little easier than the other. So like N5 is a Japanese proficiency test for novice Japanese learners. N4 is a little bit harder. And I just threw together those 2 lists by saying, hey, put the 3 about dogs into the N5 bucket and put the 3 about walking into the N4 bucket. So that's our pretty much the entirety of our state that we're starting with. We also have one user account, which is just my user, but for the purpose of this first test, we're just going to write, go through the whole sign up workflow, ideally. Now, full disclosure, I haven't tried this before. I don't know if it's going to work. Another feature that I implemented over the last couple days in the evening was to rip out all of the requirements that in order to sign up for this Kame-Same service, you also need an API token and an account over at this other place. So I want to be able to just sign up without a network connection, a nice fast test without having to think about a network integration right off the bat. Okay, so without further ado, let's start a test. Now, one way to start a test is just make the file. That's probably what I'm more inclined to do. most of the time. Another way is you can run the generator, and we struggled with the generator for system tests a bit last time. So if I run a generator here and I call it sign up, see what Rails does. Signups test. Okay, again, Rails is just got a 15-year track record of being hilarious when it comes to inflecting plurals in English. So that works for me. Visiting the index. So, if you've ever seen me talk over the years about testing, I'm often promoting very small tests and tests that very consistently hew to arrange, act, assert. If you don't know what arrange, act, assert is, basically, you start with like some tests set up, ideally just 1 or 2 lines. And then you have like, your subject under test, and you're like, do the thing. And you probably have a result that you want to apply that to. So that's your act phase. So arrange up here, and then act, and then final phase of the test is assert. So make sure that, the thing is what you think it should be. Okay, so that's how I normally like to write unit tests, as well as tests of code like APIs or library methods or something. But for browser-based tests, what I'm really more interested in is like a thin connective line that tells a story of how some stakeholder gets some kind of value out of the system. And I could write really thin slice tests of just like, do I see this input? When I type into this input, does the input change? Yes. Okay, then I could write another test that moves on to the next one. And that would tell me that like, user agents are successfully able to render form elements, but they've been doing that for like 35 years. And that has nothing to do with really like what I'm accomplishing in my app. What I care about is like, if I give you an email and a password and I hit sign up, do I see a homepage? And so my tests, that's all to say, end up looking like a lot longer scripts. And so then the challenge of test organization for integration tests like this, like browser tests, is not so much like, am I able to nest everything well and name everything consistently and have like a scatter of a whole bunch of little tiny tests everywhere? It's really, when I tell my story in each of these tests, is it appropriately sized? Does it navigate realistically through the parts of the system? When you read it, is it clear what's going on, or is it just a whole bunch of CSS selectors? That's the kind of stuff that I'm thinking about, because they're just fundamentally written differently and maintained differently and thought about differently because they change for different reasons than for unit tests. Okay, so test theory aside, I'm stalling because I'm nervous because you're here and you're watching me. So just cover your eyes, and then I'll be able to write for a little bit, and then I can explain what I wrote. Okay, so first test here, signs up for an account. And the first page you go to if you're unauthenticated should spit you out to a login page. And we can run a dev server here to just kind of eyeball, I guess, Twitter. Okay, so that's how broken I am. When I open up a browser, the first thing I do is type TW because I've just got this Pavlovian, this terrific void in my soul that just seeks validation from everyone on Twitter all the time. So you caught me. So instead of going to Twitter, I'm going to go to localhost. I'm the worst. All right. And you can see this is where I am now, right? I am at a generic login page. You can see that if you don't have an account yet, and we're not going to have an account yet, we can click this link that says sign up. So that should be pretty easy to do. You say click link, sign up. And we actually did a little bit of this in our hello test because it was really the only thing you could do with the application at the time. If you click that link successfully, sort of wrote that little bit of API logic correctly. By the way, if you are using Capybara, you probably are going to have the README up next to it or its docs. Very often when I get stuck on like the exact wording of a method, I'm just searching against it. All right, so then fill in. Is it fill in? I've already forgotten. Fill in. Yes. I hate how often I have to reference that stuff. 10 years or whatever, you think could memorize it. I do remember that argument. So fill in name with, I need a name. Let's see, I've picked on Todd and Jason, so let's just go through all of the double agents by their hired date. So Andy, Vita, hey Andy, fill in email with the dash, with Andy at example.com, fill in password with, I know the only password requirement is that it be at least 6 characters, and that because my name has 6 characters, I make every single test password just my first name, because I'm vain and it's easy to remember my name. Also, I spelled that wrong. Okay, so I'm going to fill in all this stuff, and then I'm going to click sign up. Click button this time, sign up. And then I kind of just want to wait. I can do that in a bunch of different ways. One way I could do it is I could say binding.irb, which is like the Ruby's newer built-in way to just like give me a terminal at this location. And the reason I want to wait is I want to see what the state of the browser looks like so I can figure out the next thing I want to do. So I'm going to run this test kind of incrementally and just add to it piece by piece as I work. And also, if you've been curious why I write B in front, I'm just lazy. I don't use bin stubs appropriately like a real Rails developer should. I could be writing bin Rails, or I could have like, my path I could trust my path to be set up correctly, and I never trust it. So I just lazily write B Rails. It's even slower. I know it's slower, but I still do it. Let's break the habit. Test system, and then I'm going to call out the system test that I'm running here, which was... what was it? It was called signups test. Very natural English. All right. Let's roll. Hey, all right. Okay. So we got a little bit further. And now we don't even need that dev server at the moment, because we can look here. We can see, okay, he's logged in. He has an account. I can click in here, right? I can move around. That's fine. There's his information. I could go in, I could change some settings. That'd be a valid thing to test and make sure it works. But, the first test I want to write is like, what is the point of the application? The point of the application isn't to change your settings, not just search for things, not necessarily look at your progress. It's to, the primary flow in this app is do lessons, then you wait some period of time, and then you do reviews of those lessons, and then you do more reviews if you get them right or wrong. 2 things about this application make it hard to write automated tests for, and one reason I haven't done it yet. And so we're going to figure those out. If you do a bunch of lessons, they're going to come at you in random order. So I basically need to make the test either conditional, which is a vector for all sorts of mistakes to be made, meaning like, if you see this, respond with this. If you see this, respond with that. See what happens. Or I need to, if I'm not going to make the test kind of conditional based on the behavior of the system, I need a backdoor or something to tell the system, hey, you know how you normally randomize stuff? Please just do everything in this predictable order. Some ways that tests can do that is to pass a particular seed value up front, so the randomness is predictable and consistent. I don't really know what our solution should be here. I'm just going to make something up. We're going to figure it out. So here's the N5 vocabulary list that I was mentioning. There's different modes for lessons. We're going to just do regular lessons, which means like as soon as you get the question right, it's going to go into your review queue. And there's some other stuff we could probably assert here, like that there's nothing being studied yet. That way, once you complete a lesson, you can verify that it got added by checking to make sure that this number goes up. That's valid, I think. So let's go back to the state that we were in. Also hide this. So this is where Capybara dropped us off. We can write new Capybara commands here. Capybara has a long history in my experience of like when I try to do stuff from the console like this, sometimes it just stalls out, sometimes it just like fails, and I think it's usually because of a disconnect between the main Ruby process and whatever web driver it's using, like Chrome driver in this case. So this might blow up, but it would be a predicted blow up. First thing I want to do is I want to click this lessons link. Cool, that worked. So every time something works, I'm just gonna paste it in here. Okay, so looking at lessons, I'm gonna use. I was thinking I was gonna just use the first list, but I'd rather have to be forced to select a list, make sure that the list changed correctly. So let's say, how should we select this? There's no visual label, and I suspect that I've not done the correct thing, which is make sure that I've got. Oh, okay. Well, this is better than nothing. I've got a hidden selected list. And there's actually recent changes to accessibility standards with ARIA where you can actually have like hidden labels that have ARIA clues that they should be read by screen readers, and I should go through and update this and figure those out. But if I say, hey, select from selected list, I don't remember this API at all. JLPTN4 vocabulary. Is it from? Oh my goodness, look at that. This must have been beginner's luck. I typed a thing and it just worked the first time through. I don't know how many months or years it's been since I've had to use that one. Okay, so I selected the list. I could make an assertion at this point. I could say page should contain N4 level JLPT exam because it's part of the description of that list. So going back over to our command line here, I can say, all right, well, a page should contain, I think that's what it's, not a method. Okay, well, back to the README. Capybara page contains. Come on. Ah, damn it. I knew it's not that hard. I know that this is a thing that I do all the time. All right, well, maybe it isn't this cheat sheet. Has content. Page has content. There we go. Okay. And one thing too, you'll notice that a lot of browser testing tools don't use assertion-y language necessarily in their APIs, and that's because in order to play the waiting game of if the thing just doesn't show up, then I guess it's not working, ? That's like what failure means for most types of browser testing tools. And so as a result, you say like, hey, find this element. If you can't find the element, that must mean what a test failure is. Because you're writing the kind of story-like scripts, it sort of makes sense that just driving forward and continuing to click stuff, and if everything that you click doesn't blow up and the next thing gets found, I guess that means you're working. That said, still it does make some sense to verify certain things because not everything's interactive, right? So page has content. Okay. Never know whether I want, with DSLs like this, to use parentheses or not, because these are method invocations, and normally on method invocations, I like to use parentheses. But I don't know, when things look like DSLs, I get all excited. Okay, so we're back to Chrome. Looking at this. So that was happy. And then I'm going to click Show Details. So now as long as this is like unique, this will be fine. Oh, wasn't able to find the link. That's not great. Why not? Show details. You definitely look like you're spelled right. You definitely look like a link. I wonder if this is one of those things where Capybara has just lost its connection to the page, or if I'm just dumb. Try that again. Okay. Does it still work? That's still true. Oh, you know what? The link doesn't have an href. And maybe it needs to for Capybara to consider it a link. Which means I'd have to find it some other way. Finding something in Capybara based on like, does it have this text? Once you get past the basic helpers, the form helpers, like find link, find button, and so forth, it makes it a little bit harder to select things based on text. Cypress is actually the exact opposite. So let's, how should we select this? We could say, and instead of find, we can say all, and that'll select all of them instead of just like fail if we get multiple. That way, like I could say, like, show me all the A tags, right? And I could map over them and I'd say, hey, give me the text for all those A tags. And would I find, then there, boom, there's show details, right? So one thing I could do, and it would be sort of inefficient and not very, how the API wants to be used necessarily. But I could say, find A where A text equals show details. Now, this is not going to go well for us if we're in a state where there might be some loading happening, because as soon as you use like this all method, it's going to say, this is exactly what's on the page right now. It's not going to wait for a particular A tag. And that means that if like this show details was behind like an Ajax loading spinner, at this moment, the normal Capybara wait time of like giving the app a few seconds to process, it's not going to apply here. And so this is only a safe thing to use if you're certain that there's no loading happening. And I'm certain there's no loading happening, A, because I wrote the application, but B, also because we just checked this text right here. So we should be able to select it that way. Okay, there we go. And if I just add a click onto that, boom. All right. So in the interest of moving forward, we're not going to necessarily argue that it's not a link because it doesn't have an href on it. We'll just type that in, click show details. And now we're probably going to be in a similar state. Oh, okay, cool. So actually, this selector can be pretty easy. Now, I haven't really talked about like theory craft on selectors very much. I personally do not love using just whatever class happens to be sitting on an element as a selector for a test, because that stuff can change for nonsense reasons, and that's fine in just the course of business. It's an implementation detail, and if somebody changes it, then my test breaks, and then these are the hardest to fix tests when something incidental just changes. And so if you are worried about maybe miscommunication or these tests breaking overnight and then somebody having to figure it all out without a great clear line of communication to who might have been making those changes, any kind of coupling at the implementation level is just like signing up for pain. Now, in the interest of expediency, this time I'm just going to map to these two classes and hope they don't change, because I'm the only developer on the project, so I can safely do that. But it would make real good sense for us to maybe add a new attribute that is just testing specific, or use another standard attribute like rel, and use that one to describe the thing in plain English so that we can, or plain language, so that we can grab it this way. But I've already spent too much time on this. I'm just gonna find. Go back to our CLI. How do I do this? Find element, or just find. So that's one element with two classes. Okay, I found that. And if I ask for its text, it's going to give me 0 and apprentice. Right. I don't want that. I just want the datum. So we're going to, oh, wow. Okay, I don't know what that was. Well, we're going to select the child called datum. All right, we get 0. Now we don't care that this is like numeric. We can just assert on the string. It's not like we're doing math with this number. So all of that to say, this text, again, with the expectation of no loading. Now, loading is actually happening in this case. The status, the progress that you're making on your list does get backfilled as the page loads. I hope it's fast enough. But the thing is, if it's not loaded yet, it's probably still going to read 0. So this will still work. So it might be a false positive if it does. But that said, because we've said find statistic apprentice datum, it's going to at least wait until that component is on the page. Thing is, I really think it's going to be on the page anyway, and it might just fill in with 0. So that's not totally fantastic. I think it'll work though. So because we're in a system test, we're in Rails tests, which means there's a mini test class, which means that we have mini test assertions available to us. Now, mini test assertions are tricky for me because I always forget what order my expectation and my actual go in. So let's remind ourselves of this. Expected and then actual. Right. It just feels, I assert that 5 is this other thing. Feels backwards to me. It's always felt a little wrong to me. Okay, so let's see if that works. True. Yay. Okay, cool. So going right back. We're just blowing through this first test. Of course, we haven't actually learned any Japanese yet. So let's get on with it. So we are I'm going to document just a little bit here, like switch to the N4 list. Okay. Another thing just came up in my mind, which is that like we are writing tests that are very much tightly coupled to test fixtures. You'll see like this JLPT-N4, this is not part of the code, it's not part of the application, it might not even equal exactly what's in my production data. It is only here because this fixture file has this exact language in it. And that is unsettling to many developers who've been taught, whatever you do with your tests, don't couple to the implementation, or don't couple to this, or coupling is bad. Coupling, when you're talking about integration testing like this, of automating a browser, is not in and of itself a bad thing. The real enemy is a lack of control or a high entropy state where your test data can't really be trusted or is shifting under you all the time, or you don't have a tight way to rewind it, reset it, and know exactly what it's going to be. Because when you don't know what it's going to be, it means that you have to do all sorts of kind of conditional stuff in your test to be like, well, if it's not this, then do this. And then as soon as you start branching in a test, that's a huge smell that you don't have proper sufficient control over the subject under test. So I would much rather have tightly coupled test data, like in this case here, to my test. So I'm saying like, yep, it's coupled to the fixture. That means like if the fixtures go away, yeah, the test is going to break. And ideally, I would even have that fixture in line with the test if I could, because they so tightly need to belong together that I'm always worried that someone's going to change it. And that means that you need to be really minimal with your fixtures too, because other tests could come along and they come to rely on exactly this list. And that means no one can change it later without breaking a whole bunch of tests that they don't have in their minds, that they're not thinking about. And you can add to it usually, but to delete something from a fixture file is usually so fraught as to be like not worth it. And that's why the speed of Rails built-in test fixture facility is so important, and why the relative slowness of like an increasingly long factories file tends to sneak up on teams over time, because if they've got a 13,000 line long factory file and everything inherits from the thing above it, pretty soon it can take 15 seconds just to like create a user because of the amount of logic needed to connect all the dots between all of the different factories as they've kind of accreted over the course of the application's life. So here, okay, so again, that was a long-winded way to say it is okay in my professional opinion that this line is tied to this line. Okay, again, I'm stalling. I should just click Start Studying. We're gonna let regular lessons. So this regular lessons thing is, I think, also this is a new user. It's not based on my user. So the regular lessons is the default. Let's just click Start Studying. Click button. Here we go. Oh, right. This is, hey, all right, so you'll see that there's 6 things in my inbox. That's 3 different items, and there's a challenge card for production as well as for recognition of each thing. So that means in this case, it wants us to produce the English language of what does this kanji mean, which is to walk. If we'd seen the word walk up here and a pink background color saying kanji, then we would need to provide the kanji. Now, this is where we gotta get into, for something such a small data set, should we drive the answers that we give it conditionally based on some data structure? Or should we hack the application to become not random somehow? And, I'm thinking about the dozens of lines of JavaScript that determine which order exactly each of these lessons gets rolled into, and I feel like it would be a distraction to figure out how to hack that up. So instead, we're gonna make an affordance in our test that basically will respond somehow to this randomness. Now, one idea, if we only want to respond to one particular word, every time we get one that isn't that word, we could just click the skip button. What it'll do is basically it'll drop it out of this particular lesson session, and that'll let us focus on just the one word we want. That way, instead of building an entire hash of every single potential card that you might get in the lessons queue, we're only getting the one that we want. So I think that's probably the safest way to go. All right, so which one should that be? So let's say, first of all, let's see if we can read what the challenge text is. It's probably in another simple selector that I'm mildly uncomfortable with using. It's actually in an SVG. Interesting. Yeah, so I do that so that I can dynamically size the text to a particular view box. Okay, so is there going to be only one class? So find meaning. Okay, there's just one. That's great. Find meaning.text. Okay, so less great is that it's also picking up the parts of speech. So I could say find whatever's in the SVG. That feels bad. Because the node is named text, it feels better to me for some reason, so let's do that. All right, so we're going to find this text. And here's the text. If it's not something something, click skip. If it is something something, do our thing. So what that sounds to me like is a loop. Now using a straight up while loop sounds dangerous because maybe we'll just never get the thing, at which point we have a test that'll never fail. That's probably not a great idea. We know that there's 6 things. Again, we control our test data. So we could say up to 6 times do a thing. That's safer for sure. So let's think through this. So 6 times do. Oops. We'll call it the challenge. And if it's the one that we want, and I haven't decided which one we want yet. So we're in N4, so these are all going to be to walk. I'll say if the challenge is the production, so to walk, that's the one we want. Fill it out. And then we're going to want to break from this loop because we'll have done the thing that we wanted to do. Actually, do we want to break? No, we'll just want to keep on skipping the other ones. So we'll just click skip otherwise if it's not that one. So we are indeed going through this session 6 times. You can see, like, I'm not literally sweating. I am figuratively in my brain sweating because I don't like having any kind of logic in tests. I don't like having ifs and elses. I don't like having loops. And because that is untested code. Like, that could fail me now. And if it fails me, then I have two problems. I have an app that maybe doesn't work, and I have a test that I can't trust. So I don't like this. if I were to really stick with something like this, I'd probably build it into a properly tested, separate, like, test facility code that would go live someplace else and help me manage this into some kind of helper. Okay, so if it's to walk, do that. Otherwise, we're going to find a link called skip. So find link. Again, this, if it doesn't have an href, it's not going to work, is it? Yeah. Okay, well, it's got a title. That's neat. Let's find extra actions, and then... So one thing you can do in a lot of these things is you can chain stuff. So we can chain extra actions, and there's only going to be one of them. So fine, not all. So this will wait until it's loaded, which we want in particular because the loading for the review stuff can take a little bit of time. So find extra actions, look for the one with the name skip. So all A, and here's all of them. But you know, there is a way to select on text. I just don't remember what it is. So this will fail because it's like, this matches three things, right? Yeah. And oh, I've just had like my color palette here forever. All right. So this matches three things. All right. If it were CSS, I'd say, hey, if the text is skip, invalid selector. Now, when Capybara was new, it was all XPath. And XPath makes selecting the text content of a node very easy. It would look something like, it's been very many years, something like this, I want to say. But we're not going to use that because nobody knows XPath anymore, it seems like. Instead, we're going to say, boy, text. All matchers have these options. Oh, neat. I forgot that they added this. Find a text. Oh, this is great. This works. This is fantastic. This is probably totally not going to work, but let's try it. Yay! All right, cool. We selected a thing. And we're going to click it. Cool. So let's pretend that we're filling out. We're now going to manually be our loop. It's really easy to just write a test script, and your one line of REPL is one line of the test. Here we have to like be thinking of the state that our loop would be in. So if it's not the thing that we want, we run this line. And this isn't to walk, even though it's literally the answer to this question is to walk. It's the flipped one. It's the one that wants us to produce the English. Now this one says walk, but it's not to walk, so it's not looking for the verb, it's looking for the kanji, which means you don't want it either, so we're going to run this again. This one means sleepwalking. And then this is again asking us for muyubyo. And now here, we're finally the one that says to walk. So first we want to make sure we get this language right. To walk. Yeah, okay, that matches. So in this event, what do we want to do? We want to fill out an answer, and then we want to probably hit enter, because that's the most common way that people answer questions. So we're going to load up here. The input name is answer. So I think that means we can just say, is there a label? Man, it's amazing to think this entire application comes down to like one input. It's all about this one input. And everything else, that's the worm, and everything else is the tube that just kind of gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, because the end-to-end life of this application is just you type stuff into this field. So it's really funny that I never even thought to make a label for it. Shame on me. All right. I think, though, that the Capybara selector can select on the name of the field, which is not ideal, but we can try it. So we're going to say fill in Aruku. Oops, that's the width side. Fill in name, answer. See if this works. Nailed it. All right, cool. So we're going to fill that in. And then how do we send an enter key? Now we could just click this little emoji hand, but I want to know how to type keys, like special keys. I think that's also relevant. I guess I'm gonna have to Google. Send enter key Capybara. Yes. Thank you. What? Oh, really? You just, okay, well, all right. So what it's saying here is you just tack on a \n. So we're gonna erase what we wrote in here into our little test bed. We're gonna go over here and we're gonna say, add on this. And it should just complete the session and move us to the answer. So let's see that happen. Hey, all right, cool. So that hit enter, which sent the answer over our WebSocket to the server. Server then responded, yes, you got that correct. Probably should have tested the get it wrong version, but like this is just happy path right now. And you can see we get a little bit of narrative. So you get, yes, this word, which is read like aruku, does mean to walk, great job. And an action like if that was a mistakenly, you don't want to actually study, you can remove it from your reviews. You could open it in these different tools. You could add an alternate way to spell the Japanese word or an alternate English definition for the word. We don't need to do any of that right now. In fact, I kind of want to quit while I'm ahead. We're going to type in this /n. And then from here, to get out of the test, even though there is not an interactive input here, the way that we use the application is it globally captures the enter key, because if you're doing hundreds of these per day, you're just used to mashing on that enter key a bunch. So we're going to say, great. This might not be it just coincidentally, this was the last item in our loop. So it might not be in practice. So just hitting enter is the right thing to do. But I don't know what filling in means if we're not selecting something. I just want to hit the enter key. I don't want to select a thing on the page. I could just hit the emoji hand, and that sounds easier, so let's do that. So this little emoji hand to the right. I'm a really lazy person, and so I could create vector art for all this stuff, but I just have a bunch of emoji icons, which I guess is on brand for me. All right, so there's an anchor tag called just emoji right. And again, there's no href, which means click link won't work. But we have discovered, again, the colors thing keeps popping up. What's going on? All right. We've discovered that you can pass text as an option to any of these selectors. So that means that I can say find an anchor tag with the text, this emoji hand, and click it. So let's see if that works. Hey, look at that. Great. After these 6 runs at it, right, then we should be at the point where we're at this lesson summary. We could count, for example, that there's 1 thing under completed and there's 5 things under skipped. That seems like an appropriate test. Page has content, lesson summary. I want to make sure that if page doesn't have the content that we think, that it actually triggers a failure. So it has that, but if I say summary, does it fail? Ooh, it doesn't fail. It's just a yes, no. This won't trigger a test failure, right? Because I'd expect it to raise an exception. Okay, I'm not in Pry, so I can't just like ls page. Have text. Expect page. Oh, so that's like an RSpec matcher. Okay. But what if I don't have RSpec handy? Capybara system test assertions page content. So again, a lot of people who started using Capybara became popular and rose to prominence in the RSpec community and the Cucumber community far before Rails had system tests, which introduced Capybara first class. This shouldn't be so hard. Assert. Well, you know, I guess I could just write the assertion because it did wait. So I'll just assert. What? We'll say, where's the first time we've used this? I mean, this is not great. Okay, so this is going to fail because it's from an earlier page. I say it's not great because the assertion failure is not going to be awesome. You see this like if this were to fail in a terminal, right, like headlessly, all I'd see is assertion, expected false to be true thieves. That's not fantastic. So what I could say is write a message here. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, that's not where we write messages in mini tests apparently. Mini test assertion message. Yeah, maybe. Oopsie. All right, let's write this way. I bet you it has something to do with parentheses precedence. So if I wrap that, maybe that'll work. Did not find N4 list. Good enough for me. Like, at least now, it's not the cleanest, it's not pretty. There's probably a better way to do this, and you know, I apologize for not having it off the top of my head. All right, so make sure that we see this header. That one worked. Now, of course, we can test the negative case just in console real quick. Make sure that message comes up. Never trust something you haven't seen exercise. Could not find lesson summary. In fact, I don't really like that header. Okay. So we want to just make sure completed has one thing, skipped has a few. Oh, and this is the item page. This selector looks like not a lot to grab onto here because there's nothing semantic in this. I could say, oh, it's not even a child, it's just a sibling. I do know the order of these item lists, so I could just say the first one has 1, the second one has 2. Don't love that. Oh, what if I had just said completed, skipped, and I said, look, just give me all of the item list. So completed. Wait, I guess I need to do some kind of splatting with this, huh? So that's one thing. That's the other one. Okay, so skipped text. Yeah, okay, so that looks right. So this is gonna just give us the 2. This is not ideal because it's not as specific as I'd like, but in the interest of time, we're gonna say, okay, completed dot all li size is 1, assert equal expected and then actual. Okay. Now again, this is also going to be an assertion that's like expected 1 to be 1, which is not super helpful. So custom messages seem like they make sense here. Expected 1 completed lesson. And I can see that message actually work, hopefully. Okay, cool. And you see the message now at the bottom here, as well as the expected and the actual. Okay, so we're going to grab that. All this copy pasting, I should have a more efficient way to type all this. Okay, I'm going to start making this bigger. And then this one here, skipped. First, the right answer here is 1. This should be 5. 5 skipped lessons. Okay, so make sure that line works. True. Okay. Now we're cooking with gas. The final thing to test is that when we look at the lessons page, we see this. So a couple things should happen. One, because we'd shown details before, the details should still be shown. That's a stateful component. We haven't reloaded. Well, even if you reload the page, I think it sticks. So that means that we should be able to just to click the lessons link, and then, so that's what I did. So click link lessons, and then we should be able to look at the apprentice datum again. And so here now we can just grab that line. So opportunity for extraction in the future, maybe if we do a whole bunch of stuff with this component, but we probably won't. And we're gonna call that a day. If this test passes, I'm pretty happy. All right, so let's exit. Something happened. I don't know if that's everything we wanted. We're gonna run this test again. We're gonna cross our fingers. Ah, rats. It looked like it got pretty far. It got all the way down to line 39. So, real good chance that this was a timing issue. Oops. Let's see if that's what it was. Sure seems like it was probably a timing issue. I saw a little flash of animation here. So that means if I paste this, it'll probably work. Whew, boy. So how do you wait for something that is already on the page? It's just not the right value. There is a way in Capybara to make sure that an element has certain text and that it will wait. So let's grab this again. See, that was waiting. So this will be slow. And this will be fast. So this is a better assertion, even though I'm not wild about it. Because at least it waits for anything. And just like we're talking earlier about like coupling to your implementation detail with like class selectors, if you couple your test to the concept that no loading is happening at a particular page, you're coupling to an implementation detail. Because if one day somebody changes something to be asynchronous and starts loading, even if it's like maybe a perceptible to your test, it might not be meaningful to a user that it loads in 200 milliseconds, but like that's too slow for your browser test. So always be thinking about that kind of stuff. All right, that's the line that we want. Let's see if this fixes us. And again, with the custom message, expected 1 apprentice item in the list. All right. Friend of mine, Jason Rush, who is Todd Kaufman and I, when we started Test Double, like one of our first client developers that we paired a bunch with, we had to do a lot of Capybara together, a lot of browser testing, and he'd say, it's totally going to work this time, every time he ran. Okay, great. It's totally going to work this time, except we wrote the wrong assertion. So let's try that again. What? Oh, it's assert equal. Ah, shoot. I meant just assert. Also, it was running both tests, but I was giving it this path. Do I have to like Oh man. Do I have to do this whole rigmarole of like test ops equals name equals this to get just my one test to run? I hope not. Oh, maybe I do, but it was just like also the wrong thing. Yeah, so running just a single test works with the new Rails test runner for normal tests, but maybe not for system tests. In any case, we got to passing. So like, I'm pretty happy, right? Like this test doesn't do everything the application does, but it definitely signs up for an account and, you know, maybe I guess a more accurate thing, and completes the first lesson. Does some stuff. It exercises probably like, I don't know, 30% of the overall system's code paths, maybe even more. So that's pretty slick. Yeah, this was fun. You know, it took us about an hour to write our first Capybara test that does real stuff with real test data. And so I think it's probably wise to take a break at this point and then turn it over to Cypress and basically write the same test, but you know, it'll probably go a little faster this time because we have like a little bit more in mind and have had some of the kind of introductory conversations about the different trade-offs here that matter. Yeah, this is a pretty good first start. You know, if you watch this video out of context, it's going to be part of like a multi-step playlist. So again, here's my contact info. Easiest way to get a hold of me is always at Searls on Twitter, but feel free to shoot me an email at justin@testdouble.com as well. Happy to chat anytime. If you've got any thoughts or insights, you know, feel free to send nitpicks and corrections, but trust me, I know I made a bunch of mistakes and I forgot a bunch of stuff in this session with you here. That's okay, that's natural, but you know, we got a pretty good outcome, I'd say. So I'm going to commit this. And then we'll move on to doing the same test in Cypress next time. So yeah, thanks. Catch you soon.